Hello, this is Guide to Listening. In this video, I'm going to explain a little bit about what to do during listening. Okay, we're going to discuss some listening skills and we're going to discuss some tips that you can probably try when you are doing your listening test. Now let's get started. Before we talk about some listening skills or types of listening skills and things that we can do during listening, let's have a look at the challenges that most people, most language learners, are facing when they are learning any second language. The first one is, of course, listening in foreign language is the biggest challenge. Okay, it's mainly because the vocabulary can be confusing. Okay, it is true that when we are learning a second language, vocabulary and words, they can be very challenging, and it can cause a big problem in a listening test. The second one is the structure. Well, sometimes we are not very familiar with the structure of the sentences or the structure of the conversation or the language itself. And pronunciation also. Okay, this is another challenge. It is somehow very difficult when we are learning a second language, especially when the pronunciation is somehow different from the language that we speak. And last but not least, listening test itself is challenging because concentrating is difficult. Okay, sometimes when we listen to a long conversation, when we listen to a long speech, well, the biggest challenge is not anymore about vocabulary, about structure, about pronunciation, but simply to concentrate, to focus on the conversation, to focus on the speech is very difficult. Okay. So what to do then? Well, of course, there are some things that we can do. All right, so don't worry about it. The first one is we can start, well, uh, by knowing the types of listening skills, of course. And we can actually follow a certain routine, okay? And of course, we need to practice. Okay, now let's have a look at some listening skills that are very common in a listening test. The first one is listening for main idea. What is actually listening for main idea? This type of listening skill requires you to identify the overall idea in the whole recording. Okay, so it's like identifying the gist or identifying the topic of the conversation or the topic of the speech. Second skill, which is very common also, is listening for details. Unlike listening for main idea, listening for details requires us to listen for words or phrases. This can be very specific, okay? We need to actually listen for the specific words or phrases that are mentioned in the conversation or mentioned in the speech. The third skill is inferring meaning, okay? Well, this is somehow a little bit difficult because when we infer meaning, we listen not for the words or phrases or not for the topic, but we listen to identify the difference between what is said and what is meant. But it is true sometimes when we say something, we mean something else. So inferring meaning is kind of reading in between the lines. You try to understand what the speaker is trying to say by looking at the words or the phrases that are spoken by the speakers, and this can be very challenging. The next skill is recognizing context. What is this? When we this type of skill actually requires us to listen to identify where the conversation takes place or who is speaking. So this is like knowing the situation or knowing the context where the conversation takes place or where the speech takes place. Once we understand already, once we know already the types of listening skills, it is very crucial for everybody to develop a routine during, before, during, and after a listening test. Before listening, it is very important to make predictions, okay? And making predictions can be done by skimming the questions or the options or the diagrams or the graphics to anticipate the conversation. So before listening, I can say that this is actually the key to listening, okay? So before you really, really actually listen to the audio file, listen to the conversation or the speech, making prediction actually stimulates our brain and activates our prior knowledge. So it's kind of like, make ourselves aware of the topic or the probable topic of the listening. What's next is while listening. What can we do while listening? Well, of course, we need to identify what's important, okay? Once you have your prediction, okay, in your mind, it's going to be very easy. I'm not going to say easy, but it's going to be very, very helpful and crucial when you actually are listening to the conversation or to the speech, okay? It helps you to identify what's important and notice the text structure is also something important. So you can actually think about, okay, am I going to listen to an explanation? Am I going to listen to a conversation between a man and a woman, a parent to the children, and so on and so on. So when you notice the text structure, you will be able to kind of like, anticipate what's coming, okay? And last but not least is take note of important details. Okay, like I told you previously, concentration is a challenge, okay? And taking note of important details while listening can help you overcome the problem, okay? Take note of important words, phrases, numbers, names, address, anything, okay? That's going to be very, very crucial for you. After listening, unfortunately, we cannot do much after listening because I think it's very rarely that you can actually replay the audio file. Most listening tests will not allow you to re-listen to what you have listened. That's so unfortunate. But the only thing you can do, of course, is check. Okay, you look back and then make sure that everything, the spelling is correct and everything feels right. And the last one is, of course, practice. All right. Well, listening is a skill, right? And a skill can't be studied. It needs training, right? I'm gonna give you an example like a basketball player. A basketball player needs practice. Okay. They cannot just sit down and read books about basketball and then go out and play on the court. Um, no, it cannot happen. They need to practice. And listening is a skill. Also, when you practice and when you are comfortable and familiar with the target language, everything will be so much easier for you. Okay, so practice. That is the last tip. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope this video really, really helps you, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.